Thanks for taking the time to listen to our latest content here on the Blood Red channel. Guy here with just a quick message. Do you want the very latest Liverpool FC news directly into your inbox? Well, then sign up to our daily LFC newsletter, which will bring you the breaking news and big events from around Anfield. To subscribe, just go to bit.ly/LFC newsletter. That's bit.ly/LFC newsletter, or click the link in the description of this podcast and pop in your email address. It really is that simple. That link once more, bit.ly/LFC newsletter. Well, thanks for your time, and on with the podcast.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Welcome to the Blood Red podcast, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo, as we react to the latest news from Anfield with big transfer news to get stuck into today. With Jamal Lewis having been firmly in the red sights, Michael Edwards turned away from that deal, instead looking to Greece and looking at Kostas Tsimikas and saying, you're the one that I'm with. The Reds now set to make the Olympiakos defender their first summer signing as Premier League champions. We'll get the latest on the deal, how it came about, and where he fits into the master plan at Anfield. Joining myself, Guy Clarke, is our Liverpool correspondent, Paul Gorst. Gorst, you've had a weekend off. I hope you've got plenty of rest in, because it's a rather busy one to come back to.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And I'm just marvelling at that intro, to be honest, Guy. That was masterful.
Yeah, there's more to come. We've got our own beauty school dropout in Joe Rimmer with us as well.
Yeah.
Joe, how are you?
You're on form today, aren't you? Very good, very good. I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I was working yesterday and thankful for some transfer news. It made the working day a bit quicker anyway.
Yeah, certainly it is. I mean, with the intros, you have to pull them out when the big news comes out, and certainly what we've got. And the amount of podcasts we do as a pair, some may say we go together. Matt Addison, Matt, how are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks, mate. Still enjoying your intros. There's been a couple of good ones recently, but I think that one is probably the pick of the bunch.
Well, as I say, then we've got a lot to get into, and it is, of course, transfer season, and Liverpool have made their move. Gorsty, Kostas Tsimikas coming in from Olympiakos, set to come in for his medical. Not quite a done deal yet, but what's the latest on the deal? You are the man who has all the information. Where are we at?
Yeah, it was actually Theo Squires, wasn't it? Yesterday doing most of the coverage. I was off all weekend, and he stepped in, and to be fair, he was full of news, wasn't he? I was told last night that Tsimikas was actually flown into England yesterday for his medical, which is either taking place today or tomorrow. A couple of people I spoke to today, a little bit tight-lipped on that, should we say? But yeah, it looks like it's a deal that's going to get over the line. 24-year-old Greek international, going to be a deputy to Andy Robertson. I think he'll know that coming in, that you're not going to dislodge Andy Robertson straight away. The Premier League champions and currently still the Champions League holders, aren't they? So he's going to come in, and it's going to be some probably much needed backup, to be honest, for Robertson, who's had an entire season without a deputy to kind of keep him on his toes. He hasn't really needed it, if we're honest. He still had a fantastic season and being one of Liverpool's standout players. But I do think when he doesn't play, there's quite a lot missing to this Liverpool team. So hopefully Tsimikas will kind of almost be like a Robertson light, if you like, and provide a similar kind of balance and pace and willingness to get forward. So it's 11.75 million is what we've been told from people inside the club. Someone close to the players actually suggesting it's going to be closer to 15 million, which is an interesting one when you think that Liverpool walked away from the Jamal Lewis deal after 12 million was rejected. But either way, they're going to be bringing in a new left back, and it's started the ball rolling on the summer window.
Yeah, certainly. And Joe, they've moved really quickly with this as well, Liverpool, haven't they? Because middle of last week we began to hear the move towards Jamal Lewis. That seemed to fall away over the course of the weekend. And just as you were dusting yourself down and thinking, oh, well, that one might not be happening, immediately this sort of seemed to spring up out of nowhere that he was, as Gorsty says, flying in for a medical.
Yeah, it's talking to me here, Guy.
Yeah.
This question directed at me. Yeah, it all developed quite quickly yesterday. It seemed. I think he was someone that they've watched for a long, long time, and he was one of four people on a short list. I think Lloyd Kelly and the Real Madrid fullback who's been on loan at Sevilla. I can't quite pronounce his name. We're also there, but everything about Tsimikas, I believe it's pronounced, not Tsimikas. I've seen a couple of Greek Liverpool supporters correcting Theo yesterday, so Tsimikas. Seems quite promising, and I think for the price of it, the age, he comes in with decent Champions League experience, and has actually played 4 times in the last year or so against English teams. Obviously, he played that Wolves game, Tottenham, Arsenal, and then he played at Turf Moor against Burnley as well in the Europa League. So he's got plenty of experience. So I think it seems to make a lot of sense. And I think the idea with Norwich is, I feel a bit sorry for Jamal Lewis. He obviously had his heart set and moved to Liverpool, but I think Liverpool stick to their guns. They stick to their valuations. And, we might say, oh, well, it's a 5 million or so's difference. But I think for Liverpool, it's about being principled, and it's about, if you've got a valuation, sticking to it. And that's what they've done. They've walked away. They've moved swiftly and they've moved on. So excited to see what he can bring. You end up watching these little YouTube videos, don't you? You can't really help it. And he looks good. He looks aggressive, very similar to Robertson. Seems to dribble with the ball really well, gets a lot of crosses in. And Josh from the Analysing Anfield podcast has put together a piece for us later on. I was just having a little read of that, and some really promising statistics. And of the 4 who I've mentioned that were on the Liverpool shortlist, he only came second to the guy from Real Madrid, as in terms of combined numbers, and looks very, very promising and very, very similar to Andy Robertson, and just the perfect man for Liverpool's style of play. So altogether, it just has the feeling, and perhaps we're just so used to it now, of another Liverpool bargain transfer. 12 million for a lad with Champions League experience is really, really good. So I think Michael Edwards and Liverpool will be very pleased if they can finish this one off and get it over the line.
Yeah, and to me, Matt, the feeling really with this one is it just underlines how prepared Liverpool are going into transfer windows. It's not just a one target in mind. If they can, as Joe said, pull off a bargain, they've got a list of players, and if one falls through, i.e. Jamal Lewis, they've immediately got another name on the list that they feel equally as sort of compatible with the side to bring in.
Yeah, it was such an important thing, wasn't it, to fill, because you think of Andy Robertson and the impact that he's had on Liverpool. There's not too many gaps to fill in this squad, but there's not too many left-sided defenders in the world, really, who can do a similar sort of job to him. So, as much as Liverpool did have a short list, it was a very short list of players who probably were in that right priced sort of bracket, but at the same time had the same skill set as what Andy Robertson has. So, look, Robertson's played, nearly 100 games over the last couple of seasons. It was always obvious that he was going to have to take a break at some point. And I think, judging from, the sort of limited number of, appearances that we've seen from Tsimikas, it seems like he could be someone who will come in and play a similar style. He's not going to be, as good as Andy Robertson, but that's not what the sort of purpose of buying him is. The whole point really is that he can come in and make enough of an impact and probably be better suited, certainly be better suited to that role than someone like James Milner or Nico Williams, who's sort of had to slot in at certain times. So, yeah, when you think of the number of matches that Liverpool play, Andy Robertson can't play twice a week, every week for a full season. It's going to be a case of giving him as much time on the pitch as possible. And at the same time, he will need time to bed in, but you'd imagine that process will be fairly quick, as Joe says, Champions League experience, that sort of thing. It could be, a really important buy. And, I know you speaking to a Greek journalist this morning, he was full of enthusiasm for how good he is. But I thought it was interesting as well that he seemed to suggest that they would have been hoping for maybe closer to 20 million before the coronavirus pandemic, and maybe that price tag had been brought down. So I don't know how much of an impact that might have made on the deal taking place potentially, but yeah, certainly as much as we haven't seen loads of the player, I think you've just got to trust that Michael Edwards knows exactly what he's doing, and potentially it could be another Liverpool bargain.
Yeah, it certainly does seem that way. Kostas Tsimikas, whether he goes as Kostas Tsimikas or even Shimmy, he'll be looking to shimmy his way into the Liverpool side, Gorst. That is for certain, as Joe Rimmer covers his eyes with that one. But in terms of the point Matt was making there, it was something even right from the return in Project Restart after the lockdown that Liverpool did miss that deputy to Andy Robertson. We've already referenced it enough on the pod in terms of James Milner in that position. He's been a brilliant deputy for Jurgen Klopp to rely on, but he's getting on in age, but also he isn't left-footed, is he?
No, he's a 34-year-old midfielder playing left-back, and it's not his game, is it? And it's weird to think that he played an entire season there and Liverpool still managed to finish fourth, because really is a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't really suit him. But Milner being Milner, he obviously, went about his task as professionally and as well as he could. So I think bringing in Tsimikas is a smart move. I think on the right side, Liverpool are well stocked, aren't they? They've got obviously Trent and Nico Williams amazing. Joe Gomez, if he absolutely has to, can play there. So the left back was the more pressing concern of the two full back positions. And as we say, he does seem very Robertson-esque in some of his qualities. He won't be as good, but who is going to be as good as Andy Robertson is at the moment? It's just going to be it's not going to unbalance the team too much, even when he does come in for Robertson. It might be a little bit of a downgrade in overall quality, but it's not going to be too much of a detriment to the team. If you think he's going to play in the cup games, isn't he? So the FA Cup and the League Cup. So yeah, I mean, I think Robertson played 49 of Liverpool's 57 games last season, so there is scope there for Tsimikas to play. I think sometimes Robertson was probably asked to play when he perhaps wasn't 100%. I know we had an ankle injury around about November time that was nursed very carefully, and he missed a few training sessions as a result. And if that happened now, then he'll just sit it out and get back to full fitness as quickly as possible, and Tsimikas can come in. So that's the beauty of having two senior specialist left backs. And while Jamal Lewis was the first choice target, I think Liverpool looked at it and felt that there was a little bit more value to be found in the European markets. And it was referenced behind the scenes that Everton's 17 million deal for Luka Dean from Barcelona, when Liverpool would have been paying 20 for someone who's just been relegated in the Premier League, which was not directly down to Jamal Lewis, but Liverpool just feel that they can kind of unearth a little bit more quality looking elsewhere.
And it highlights again sort of the homework the recruitment team do, Joe, in terms of how long they've been tracking this player. He's no longer a Liverpool player, Pedro Chirivella, but this one might go down as a Chirivella assist, given he was on loan at Willem-Tre with Tsimikas, sort of 3 seasons ago, and Liverpool ever since then have been keeping an eye on him. Yeah,
maybe even a little bit of a stroke of luck. Liverpool went out there to watch Chirivella, and obviously were alerted to Tsimikas, and I've watched him since then, and obviously done a hell of a lot of homework. We know that they do that for players, and it wasn't just Chirivella as well. Pep Linders was on his years-long stay back in Holland as a manager, and I believe that Gini Wijnaldum's brother as well played alongside Tsimikas. So quite a few little links there for Liverpool. But I mean, just going back to what you were saying earlier as well. I mean, he might be a second choice in inverted commas to Jamal Lewis, but I think the way Liverpool work is that perhaps isn't so much such a thing as second choices. I think that Liverpool identify a varying amount of players who fit into their system, and then see who they get the best value for. And we've seen before, Mohamed Salah was technically a second choice when Liverpool were negotiating for Julian Brandt. Andy Robertson was technically a second choice when Liverpool tried to sign Ryan Sessegnon. And I'm pretty sure the lads could probably name a couple of others, just that they were just off the top of my head. And I think that's because Liverpool's recruitment team is so good, and that it's so data driven that they find players in the same mould with very similar statistics, and then go out and watch them and make their minds up, and then do their homework on character. I believe that with Jamal Lewis, that Liverpool had done their homework on not just the type of football he was, but also the type of man he was, how he conducted himself, and they were very, very impressed and thought that he had, bags of potential to improve under Jurgen Klopp. And they obviously feel the same way about Tsimikas. So it's going to be interesting to watch him develop. That's why he's so confident now, aren't you, when Liverpool go and sign someone, even if you haven't heard much about them. There's always this feeling that they're going to be good, because they barely ever sign duds. And I think as well that the other thing to remember when you're signing people for some value is that Liverpool will be very well aware that, let's say things don't work out further down the line for Tsimikas at Liverpool, and they only pay 12 million. Well, they won't stand to lose that much. They'll probably get a decent fee back for him should they decide to sell him on. So I think there's a lot of play, and I think Liverpool are very, very clever when it comes to transfers. And perhaps talk of second choices isn't quite correct, but I do think Liverpool planned things out very, very well in the transfer market.
Yeah, very interesting point. Get your Gorsty in a moment on that. I think everyone probably have their say on that, the way in which Liverpool operate in the window. And Matt, your sort of take on it, because as Joe said, there are a few players immediately for me. I think of the deal that Liverpool wanted to do for Alex Teixeira, and then obviously that didn't happen. They go a different way with Roberto Firmino moving into a number 9 position, already evolving the squad. They do seem to have these, as Joe said, maybe not fair to call them second choice, maybe alternatives that if one move doesn't come off, they can move for another.
Yeah, I think you can add Peter Zielinski and Gini Wijnaldum and then Sadio Mane and Mario Götze to that list as well. So, there's almost in every position that Liverpool have, whoever they've bought, there's always been this sort of list of 3 or 4 names of alternatives. And I suppose it almost helps in the negotiations. Certainly, Jamal Lewis, maybe another club that wasn't quite as strong as Norwich might have, conceded and let the player go. But Norwich were more than happy to hold out for that 20 million. They were in a very strong position, but equally Liverpool were in a very strong position because they weren't pinning their hopes all on one player. They were more than happy to almost use that as a bargaining tool and try and get the best value and choose the best player from whichever club ended up being the right one. So yeah, look, we know Liverpool are one of the best teams in terms of recruitment. We've seen that time and time again, and I can only say it again. You trust Michael Edwards, you trust what the recruitment team have done, and everything coming out of Greece appears to suggest that this is the right player at the right time for Liverpool. And I suppose you can only go off the facts and what we know. Judging from what we've seen, he seems to be the right type of player. The statistics, the numbers, the data all back that up. And the fact that he's 24 as well, he's almost in that perfect sort of age group where he's experienced enough come and make an impact at Liverpool, but he's not quite reached his peak, and Liverpool can still mould him into something else. So yeah, look, it's going to be really interesting. I suppose the difference with this transfer is that he is a player who has only really played at back. He's not really played in any other position. I know Lloyd Kelly was one that Liverpool looked at, and quite often in the past they've looked at players that can play in a couple of different positions, but maybe this was just a special case where they just needed a specialist back, and that's what they've gone and got. So we will see if Jurgen Klopp does sort of transform him into maybe a left-sided centre-back or a winger or something else. But yeah, certainly, first and foremost, he's there to provide backup to Andy Robertson.
Yes, choice left back, and crucially a left footer in the team. There aren't too many of those, Gorsty. But in terms of the way that Liverpool have worked with this deal and brought in Tsimikas, it does show that, I mean, we've been doing podcasts from our kitchens, our living rooms ever since lockdown, and all of the interaction we always get is who are Liverpool signing, when are they signing them? There's always this sort of fanfare and demand for signings, but it proves that even in this restricted market, Liverpool keep their cool in the market and they make sure they get the right man.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think we get a lot of questions, don't we, about who Liverpool are going to sign, and it's not always as simple as a team have got someone in mind for 6 to 8 months. There'll be so many players who they're scouting at the same time. Look, Liverpool have just had 4 options there for the left back position, and they could have easily have looked at Jamal Lewis. If that offer is accepted, then we're not talking about Tsimikas here. It's very very fast in terms of the way things change in the transfer window. So it's not always as easy as saying this is who Liverpool are targeting, because it very rarely happens like that. I mean, I can only think of 2. I mean, Matt, there's just a handful of players who Liverpool could have had, and they've ended up going down a different route. The only 2 who Liverpool was steadfast in their kind of determination to get was Alisson and Van Dijk, and they're the 2 transfers who are the 2 most expensive in Liverpool history for a start. They are 2 who are the best in their position in the world, and the 2 who Jurgen Klopp has called slam dunks. They were the ones that they had to be slam dunks. They've of course proven that, but it's not always a thing where you have player A and you're chasing for 6 to 8 months. It's players who fit into styles, isn't it? As Joe says there, Liverpool have got a very specific way of playing, and they get players who fit that mould with their skill set. They don't bring players to the club and then try and figure out what they're all about. And I think that has at times been a problem for Liverpool over the years. It's not like that at all now, where players are very studiously scouted across the numbers, and the eye test, as they say with the scouts, So it all kind of combines to make sure that Liverpool's recruitment is one of the best in world football.
Well, Nikos Mastros got in touch with us. He says, greetings from Greece. He's an Olympiakos fan. He says, I truly believe that you'll be impressed with the quality of Tsimikas. In order to understand him better, you need to try and watch full games. And he points out his best sort of attributes are his stamina and also his passion. It does sound familiar with Andy Robertson. And we have earlier today on the Blood Red channel caught up with Themis Kasaris, who is a Greek football expert, and did give us the lowdown. He does get the feeling that he is, as you said before, Gorst, Andy Robertson light. If you do want to check that out, do find it on the Blood Red channel. But Gorsty, come back to you then, and we'll move on from Tsimikas and talk more broadly on transfers. And I suppose a lot of Reds listening into this will be hoping that this is now the war chest being opened, Liverpool strengthened when you're at your strongest, and that there's going to be a flurry of activity. You're going to tell me that that's maybe a bit high in the sky at the moment.
Yeah, I think it is. I think the fact that Liverpool have turned away from the fee that was quoted for Jamal Lewis and they've looked elsewhere. The fee is not too far away with what they've got for Lovren. Lovren was just shy of 11 million, I think, and this is 11.75. So it's very much about balancing the books. Fans won't want to hear it, but it is the truth of the matter, and it's not just Liverpool who are going to be doing the same thing. So it's a good start. Let's see what happens. I think there's always been a kind of realisation that Liverpool are going to have to wait and see and wait it out and see who they can kind of offload and see, what happens with certain situations. Jurgen Klopp was saying a couple of weeks ago that if there's going to be any significant movement, it's going to be later on in the window, which runs until the first week of October. So still best part of 2 months before it's shut. So plenty of time to kind of weigh it up and see what happens. But I don't anticipate any mega money deals.
Mega money deals, war chests being open, the transfer Grim Reaper, Paul Gorst strikes again, Joe Rimmer. It is one of those, it does seem with Liverpool that the left back was a position that they've been looking at for a while that they needed to fill. They've done that now, and maybe the inclination being, as Gorsty said, that they'll move bodies on before they then bring any further additions in.
Definitely. I mean, the other thing, quite often about Liverpool's recruitment that is so impressive is that they're not just very good at getting good fees for players coming in, that they're excellent at getting the best value for players when they sell them. So, I think that there are several players there. Harry Wilson, Xherdan Shaqiri, Divock Origi, perhaps, players that come to mind that I think Liverpool will be open to offers for. And if they can get decent fees, then we may see that reinvested. And, I think, Gorsty will know more, but the lad Sarr at Watford is someone that they've looked at. And, I think they need that sort of player, a backup for the front three. And I think a move for someone like him probably very much depends on the likes of Harry Wilson and Shaqiri moving out of the club. And if they get 20 million each for those two players, then, I think that money goes straight back in and they bring in signings. And there's nothing wrong with that. I do think, again, that people seem to think, the sell to buy model is almost penny pinching, but it's not. It's just being clever, and it's just, there's nothing worse than buying duds who then you can't get value back for. And Liverpool should be praised for the way that they do business. They do it very well, very well. They are very clever. And even I thought of $1 million for Dejan Lovren, who's 31, and albeit Liverpool had an option on his contract to extend it, they hadn't. So he only had 1 year left. So again, great value. So Liverpool will keep doing that. And I should imagine now we'll sit and wait and see whether, I think Leeds are meant to be interested in Harry Wilson and whether that sort of interest is realised. And if it is, then we could start seeing Liverpool do some things again. But look as well, towards the end of the window, Klopp says that could be when other transfers happen. And there's a lot of variables for Liverpool. The end of the window is not till October. We don't know when fans will return to stadiums. We don't know what the market will look like come October. There are plenty of other, obviously the Nike deal has been a huge success for Liverpool. They're going to release an away and a third kit, and there'll be those sorts of sales. So there'll be a lot going on for Liverpool, and a lot of ways they can make money between now and October. And I'm pretty sure they'll have targets in mind, and when they're ready, just as they have for Tsimikas, they'll move quickly. And we're probably quite surprised and quite happy with the moves that they do make. So, I think you need to take a relaxed view, and I think Liverpool will surprise us and do some good business, if not mega money deals, as Gorst said.
Yeah, and Joe makes a good point there, Matt, in terms of with Jurgen Klopp, a German at the helm, Liverpool just very efficient in how they run the squad. You've got players like, or a player like Ryan Brewster coming back maybe into the squad for next season. And actually, this whole sell to buy model, whilst we'll probably get accused of being FSG apologists, is more one of those things where actually the club are being self-sufficient, being clever, and making sure there's no deadwood just lying around. Yeah,
exactly that, especially at times like these with coronavirus and that sort of thing. It's just about really being sensible in the transfer market. I think, sometimes, particularly on Twitter, you sort of see as much criticism for Liverpool not spending as you do for teams like Manchester United, handing out huge contracts to Alexis Sanchez and things like that. So, I mean, really, Liverpool should be praised, if anything, for not going out and spending when it's unnecessary. And, for me, it all goes back to one thing, and that is that Liverpool are the champions of the Premier League. They won it by 18 points. They don't desperately need to spend. The fact that they're not spending and teams around them may well end up spending huge amounts of money really is just an indication of how far behind the other teams are compared to Liverpool. So, look, Jurgen Klopp is more than happy. Michael Edwards is more than happy with the transfer budget and that sort of thing that Liverpool have got to work with. And when you look at the job that both of them have done over the last couple of seasons, I think if they're happy with it and they're content to go again next season with these players and with little sort of players added in here and there like Tsimikas, then frankly Liverpool fans should be happy with that and should just trust really the job that they've done. So yeah, we've always said all along we don't expect Liverpool to go out and spend huge amounts of money, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. For me, if anything, that is a good thing.
Yeah, without wanting to get overly excited too early, Gorsty, we've spoken here about Tsimikas being maybe Robertson light. I know you wrote last week about interest in Ismail Assar at Watford maybe being Sadio Mane light, I don't know. But the fact that obviously Harry Wilson, his name's been talked about as interest, as Joe said, from Southampton and Leeds over the course of the weekend. There are Liverpool players who aren't all too involved in the squad, but are garnering interest from other clubs.
Yeah, it's a reason why Liverpool are always keen to get the players to sign the contract extensions when they go on loan. It just basically preserves the value, doesn't it? So they're not on loan for a year and they've knocked $5 million off their resale value because they've been playing for someone else. So it does sound as though Liverpool are quite bullish in terms of what they want for Wilson and Grujic. It's either they're looking to sell them permanently or they'll get a chance next season. I'm a little bit unsure of that because it's not going to be a traditional pre-season where Liverpool have got 6 to 8 games playing against a range of opposition to give these players a go and see if they can fit in. Liverpool, it's all very much about getting their top stars fit as quickly as possible, that restart, because they're playing the Community Shield in 3 weeks' time. So I think a lot of these players are almost bargaining chips at the moment because they're not awash with funds, and not a lot of teams are. So it's almost, can we offload these players and kind of reinvest that into the budget? Because it's a summer unlike any other, isn't it? Let's face it. There's only a handful of teams who are going to be able to operate as normal. City and Chelsea obviously being the 2 big ones. Manchester United sort of, but we're hearing that they're going to be locked in negotiations for Jadon Sancho for some time because they're not prepared to go anywhere near what Dortmund wants. So maybe the likes of Harry Wilson and Xherdan Shaqiri are being seen, as Joe says, as players who can bring in some funds for transfers.
I suppose fair to say, though, Joe, probably that if there is one issue or one area that Liverpool fans do want to probably see strengthened, it is still at the heart of defence with Dejan Lovren leaving. It does feel as though that is probably the one area where Liverpool are short at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that the alternative to the front three is a bit of a luxury, but a centre half I think now is a must. Especially Joel Matip and Joe Gomez are both had their fair share of injuries in the past few years. So I think they really do need to go out and get someone with a decent amount of experience. I know Paul said that they've been watching Ben White at Leeds, who was impressed a hell of a lot, and there's someone that if they could get him for the right price, and again the price, I think you pay a premium for young English players, and I think Brighton would want a premium for him. But if we could get him for the right price, it'd be very, very good. So, I think they certainly need a centre half. Just picking back up on some of the loan things as well. I think another good point to make on that is that, I think Chelsea used to use the loan market very, very well, and they made a lot of money through loaning players and selling them. But perhaps they weren't as deliberate as Liverpool in the sense that they lost good players, didn't they? They lost Mo Salah, they lost Kevin De Bruyne, too. So, and Romelu Lukaku was another one who's gone on to have a decent career elsewhere. So, I think with Liverpool they're a lot more deliberate in the sense that they loan players, and they know that if they're going to sell someone on, they're not going to miss them further down the line. I don't suppose there'll be anyone Liverpool will sell to raise money for transfers for the heart of defence or for an alternative to the front three that they will massively miss. But by the same token, it'd be interesting to see whether someone like Grujic, especially Grujic, he's someone that does intrigue me. He's been there since Klopp came in almost, for his first signing, technically. And we haven't seen much of him. He's done quite well in the Bundesliga. I think he's sort of been quite impressive there. So I do wonder whether he could fit in at Liverpool and be a decent alternative. But that midfield's well stocked, isn't it? So yeah, I think Liverpool have used the loan market very, very well. To answer your first question, the centre half is an absolute must.
Yeah, well, Leeds, I think, did have a £22 million bid for Ben White, knocked back by Brighton. So we'll have to keep eyes on that one. But it does look as though Joe said that Brighton probably will be commanding a premium fee for him. But in terms of what Joe said there, Matt, in terms of loaning players out and developing them, before they get loaned out, they have to come through the under-23s. And today, Liverpool have announced that Gary O'Neill is going to be joining Barry Lutz's coaching staff.
Yeah, it's an important announcement, isn't it? Obviously, the under-23 season was cut short last season because of coronavirus. The last few games didn't manage to get played out, but they are now back in training. And yeah, Gary O'Neill is somebody who obviously has a lot of experience in the game. I know he's done a lot of punditry and that sort of thing, but he's always made clear that he wants to move back into coaching and that sort of thing. And yeah, I believe he was at Portsmouth at the same time that Michael Edwards was coming through there as a young analyst as well. So potentially, there's some sort of link there, and maybe Michael Edwards has gone back to somebody that he knew in the past. So, yeah, certainly it's an interesting appointment, and I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to speak to him and Barry Lutus once the new season begins. But yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, what Michael Edwards doesn't know and who he doesn't know in football probably doesn't seem to be worth knowing about. Well, that's it from us here on this edition of the Blood Red podcast. Thanks to Paul Gorst, Joe Rimmer and Matt Addison, as always. If you want to get even more news on Kostas Tsimikas, then do check out the Liverpool Echo's Twice Daily newsletter. You can find the link for signing up to that in the description of this podcast. So do go and sign up and you'll get news directly into your inbox. Alternatively, as I said before, you can check out the podcast we did earlier with Themis Kesaris, the Greek football expert who can give us the full lowdown. But that's it from us here on this edition of the Blood Red podcast. Thanks for your time and company. Till next time, bye for now.